a sound that now carried with it a sense of triumph rather than intimidation. The diner, which had been so quiet moments ago, was now filled with a new energy. As patrons inside who had been watching from the windows began to return to their meals, exchanging whispered conversations, Leon rolled toward the diner door. His movements unhurried. He had dealt with worse in his life, and today had just been another reminder that standing firm in the face of hate and cruelty would always be the right choice. Inside, the waitress, a middle-aged woman with short blonde hair, gave him a soft smile as he entered. "Everything okay out there?" she asked, her eyes scanning him for any signs of distress. Leon returned her smile, his tone warm. "Yeah, everything's fine now, just had a little misunderstanding." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press him further. "Good to hear. Your usual, please," he replied as he sat down at his usual booth. Leon couldn't help but reflect on the brief encounter. The bikers had thought they could intimidate him, that they could take advantage of his disability. But they hadn't counted on one thing. Leon wasn't just a man in a wheelchair. He was part of a larger community, one that wouldn't hesitate to stand by him. When the need arose, the silver-bearded guardian had been right. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about the message, about showing that there was power in unity, and that even in the face of intimidation, one person could make a difference. Leon had stood firm, and in doing so, he had reminded those around him that real strength doesn't come from how much you can physically endure, but from your ability to remain true to who you are, no matter the situation. It was a lesson, not just for the bikers, but for everyone watching. No one, no matter their background or their circumstances, should ever be underestimated. And in the end, kindness and respect always outweigh fear and cruelty. As the waitress brought his coffee, Leon took a sip. Feeling the warmth of it spread through him for the first time that day. He felt a sense of peace. He had won. Not because he had to fight, but because he had stayed true to himself, and in doing so had inspired others to do the same. He was a partner in every sense of the word. The two of them had been paired 3 years ago, and their bond was immediate. King's training was exceptional, but it was his intuition that set him apart. He seemed to understand Terrence's needs before they were spoken. A skill honed during his years on the Force. King's previous life was one of action and danger. As a canine, he had been deployed on high-stakes missions, chasing down suspects, detecting narcotics, and protecting his handlers. Those experiences had shaped him into a dog with a sharp mind and an unshakable sense of duty. When he retired, his transition to guide work had been seamless for King. Protecting Terrence wasn't just a job. It was a calling on most days. The pair's presence at the park was unremarkable. Regular visitors knew Terrence and King by sight, often greeting them with a wave or a friendly hello. Children occasionally asked to pet King, their faces lighting up when Terrence explained that King was a working dog and couldn't be distracted. Parents would smile, appreciating the lesson in respect and boundaries today. However, the usual atmosphere of the park felt different. The arrival of the bikers had shifted the dynamic, their loud voices and intimidating presence creating a ripple of unease. Most park-goers kept their distance, hoping to avoid drawing attention. But Terrence, seated on his bench with King at his side, was oblivious to the growing tension. His world was shaped by sound, touch, and intuition. And while he couldn't see the bikers, he could sense the faint change in the park's rhythm. King, on the other hand, was fully aware. His keen eyes tracked the group as they moved closer, his body language subtle but deliberate. He didn't bark or growl. King was far too disciplined for that, but his posture shifted slightly, a silent signal that he was ready to act if needed. The dog's calm demeanor belied the razor-sharp instincts honed through years of training. The bikers, oblivious to King's history, saw only a man and his dog to them. Terrence appeared vulnerable, an easy target for mockery, or worse. Their leader, a man who thrived on dominance, was already eyeing the pair with a smirk that promised trouble. "You think he can even tell? We're here," one of the bikers muttered, nudging his friend. They snickered, their voices just loud enough to carry. The leader turned his attention fully to Terrence, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Nice day to sit and soak up the sun. Huh, buddy, you and your little helper there enjoying yourselves?" Terrence didn't respond immediately. He had grown accustomed to comments like these over the years, some born of curiosity, others of malice. He reached down and gently patted King's head, his fingers brushing over the dog's soft fur. "We're doing just fine," he said. Finally, his tone calm but firm. The leader chuckled, clearly unimpressed. "Fine, huh? You sure about that?" He took a step closer, the heavy thud of his boots drawing King's full attention. The dog's ears perked, and his gaze locked on the man, unwavering. Terrence tilted his head slightly, as if listening more closely to the man's movements. He couldn't see the threat, but he could feel it creeping closer. King's subtle shift in posture told him all he needed to know. But what neither the bikers nor the onlookers realized was that King wasn't just any dog. He was about to prove that even in retirement, his training and his loyalty were sharper than ever. The leader of the bikers. Tony took another step forward, his shadow now looming over Terrence and King. His boots scuffed against the gravel, a deliberate sound meant to draw attention. The other bikers hung back, chuckling amongst themselves, their laughter an unsettling backdrop to what was unfolding. Tony wasn't the type to back down from an audience he thrived on. Yet King's eyes followed every movement, his body remaining still, but charged with a quiet intensity. He didn't bark or growl. His training was far beyond that. Instead, he watched, calculating the distance, the angles, the possible threats to anyone who knew dogs. It was clear that King wasn't afraid, he was waiting. Tony smirked, glancing at his friends before turning his attention back to Terrence. "You know, I've seen a lot of tough dogs in my time," he said, his voice laced with mockery. "But this one here doesn't look so tough to me." Terrence, still seated, tilted his head slightly toward Tony. His expression was calm, almost serene, as if he hadn't registered the hostility in the man's tone. But inside, he was listening carefully. Piecing together the situation, he didn't need to see Tony to know the kind of man he was, the kind who picked fights to feel bigger, who mistook kindness for weakness. King shifted slightly, his body angling between Tony and Terrence. The movement was subtle, but it spoke volumes. He wasn't just a guide dog in this moment, he was a protector, ready to defend his partner if the situation escalated. Tony noticed the shift and laughed, a sharp grating sound. "Oh, what's this? You think you're gonna scare me, dog?" He leaned forward, his face just inches from King's. "You're just a mutt. What are you gonna do? Bark me to death?" One of the bikers called out from behind his voice, half laughing, half worried. "Yo, Tony, maybe just leave it, man." But Tony wasn't listening. His pride was on the line now, and he wasn't about to back down in front of his crew, or the growing number of parkgoers who had stopped to watch. He straightened, cracking his knuckles for dramatic effect. "Let's see if this mutt's got any bite to go with that stare before anyone could react." Tony swung his boot forward, aiming a sharp kick at King's side. The blow connected, the sound of leather against fur echoing across the now silent park. King staggered back a step, his body absorbing the impact for a split second. There was no movement, no sound, just a tense electric stillness as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Then, like a switch flipping, King's demeanor changed. His body lowered slightly, muscles coiling, his eyes locking onto Tony with a precision that sent a chill through anyone watching. A low rumbling growl emanated from deep within his chest. Not wild or uncontrolled, but deliberate and measured. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. Terrence's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. King Hold, the German shepherd, froze mid-motion, his growl fading into silence. His body remained tense, every fiber of his being ready to act, but he obeyed. His training was flawless, his loyalty unwavering. Tony, who had been smirking just seconds earlier, now looked visibly shaken. He stumbled back a step, his confidence faltering. What kind of dog is this?" Terrence stood slowly, using his cane to steady himself. His face remained calm, but his voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "This isn't just any dog," he said, each word deliberate, "and you just made the biggest mistake of your life." The crowd watched in stunned silence, their attention fixed on the man and his dog. They knew without a doubt that something extraordinary was about to happen. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to feel in every breath. King stood still, his gaze locked on Tony, unflinching and unrelenting. The once rowdy park had gone silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Every eye was on the German shepherd, waiting to see what he would do next. Terence, his hand resting gently on King's head, spoke with a calm authority that seemed to carry through the park. King Stay the dog didn't move his body taut like a coiled spring. Ready but restrained to the untrained eye, he might have appeared calm, but those who understood dogs could see the immense control he was exercising. His growl had faded, replaced by a deep stillness that was somehow more unnerving. Tony stood a few feet away, his confidence visibly shaken. He wiped his hands on his jeans, trying to play off his unease as casual indifference. "It's just a dog," he muttered, though his voice wavered slightly. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Terence tilted his head, listening to Tony's words. His lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "You don't get it?" "Do you?" he said softly. "This isn't just any dog. This is a trained canine. He spent years doing what you couldn't even dream of, protecting, serving, saving lives. And he's holding back right now because I told him to." Tony's face paled slightly as the weight of Terence's words began to sink in. "A canine like a police dog?" Terence nodded. "That's right. 3 years on the force. He's disarmed suspects, chased down criminals, and stood between his partner and danger. More times than I can count. You think kicking him makes you tough. It just makes you lucky." The crowd murmured, their collective shock rippling outward. Many had suspected King was no ordinary guide dog, but hearing the truth from Terence's own mouth gave the situation a new gravity. People exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others glaring at Tony with open disdain. King, still poised and silent, didn't take his eyes off Tony. His training dictated that he wait for the next command, but his instincts told him to stay ready for anything. His tail was low, his ears slightly back, not out of fear but out of focus. Tony tried to muster some of his earlier bravado, but it came out hollow. "I didn't know." "All right, I didn't know he was a special dog." Terence's expression hardened. "It shouldn't matter what kind of dog he is. You don't kick any animal ever, and you certainly don't mock someone who relies on that animal for their independence." The murmurs grew louder now, a low rumble of agreement and judgment. One man in the crowd called out, "You're lucky that dog's better trained than you are." Buddy Tony's friends, who had been laughing and egging him on just moments earlier, now looked uneasy. One of them nudged Tony's arm. "Maybe we should just go, man. This isn't worth it." But before they could retreat, Terence spoke again, his voice cutting through the noise. "You think walking away fixes this?" He stepped forward, his cane tapping the ground with quiet precision. "You just taught everyone here exactly who you are, and you taught my dog something too, that there are still people out there who don't deserve the respect they demand." Tony looked around, his eyes darting from the crowd to King, who hadn't moved a muscle. The weight of the moment bore down on him, pressing into his chest like a physical force. And as he stood there fumbling for a response, it became painfully clear to everyone watching that the power in this encounter didn't belong to Tony. It belonged to the man and his dog, the ones he had underestimated. Tony's bravado had crumbled, leaving him standing awkwardly in the center of a crowd that now regarded him with disdain. His friends shuffled uncomfortably, avoiding the piercing glares from the park goers. The once laughing group of bikers was now silent, their smirks wiped clean by the weight of the situation. Terence took a deep breath, steadying himself as he straightened his posture. "You didn't know he was a canine." He repeated, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "You don't need to know a dog's history to treat it with respect. It's not about what you didn't know. It's about what you chose to do." Tony opened his mouth to respond but hesitated, his words caught somewhere between an apology and an excuse. The crowd wasn't waiting for him to explain. Their collective judgment was written plainly on their faces, a silent but damning verdict. King, still sitting in his poised position, glanced up at Terence for just a moment as if checking in for his next command. Terence gave the dog a small pat on the head, his hand steady despite the tension still lingering in the air. "Good boy," he murmured the praise, a quiet reminder of the bond they shared from the edge of the crowd. A woman spoke up, her voice firm. "You owe them both an apology. A real one." Tony looked around, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the eyes on him. His pride was a heavy chain, but even he couldn't ignore the moral reckoning staring him in the face. He shifted his weight awkwardly before finally mumbling, I'm sorry. Terence tilted his head slightly, his sunglasses masking any visible reaction. Not to me, he said simply to him. Tony's face flushed his discomfort. Evident, he glanced at King, whose gaze remained steady and unyielding. Sorry. Tony muttered, barely audible. I didn't mean to, kick you. The apology was clumsy and forced, but the crowd's murmurs quieted slightly as the tension began to ease. Terence nodded, accepting the apology for what it was next time. Think before you act. It'll save you from situations like this and save others from unnecessary harm. Tony didn't respond. He simply stepped back, retreating to where his friends stood, their earlier bravado replaced with uneasy silence. One of them muttered something under his breath, and the group began shuffling toward their motorcycles. Heads hung low as the bikers made their way out of the park. A few people in the crowd clapped softly in understated acknowledgement of Terence and King's quiet strength. A father holding his young daughter leaned down to whisper, "That's what real courage looks like." The little girl nodded solemnly, her wide eyes fixed on King Terence. Sensing the shift in the crowd's mood, exhaled deeply and gave King a gentle tug on the harness. "Come on, boy. Let's go." But before they could leave, a young boy, no older than 8, ran up to them with his mother following close behind. "Mister," the boy said shyly, "your dog's the coolest, is he okay?" Terence smiled, his expression softening. "He's more than okay. He's my partner, and he knows how to handle people like that." The boy grinned, then glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Can I pet him?" Terence chuckled lightly. "Not today. Kiddo King's still on duty, but thank you for asking," the boy nodded, his admiration shining in his eyes as he watched King walk beside Terence toward the park's exit. Around them, the murmurs of the crowd began to fade as people returned to their picnics, jogs, and conversations. But the memory of what they had witnessed lingered, a quiet reminder of the power of respect and restraint as Terence and King disappeared down the winding path. The lesson they left behind wasn't just about a dog or a blind man. It was about standing firm in the face of disrespect and treating every being, human or animal, with the dignity they deserve. As Terence and King walked away from the park, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the weight of what they had witnessed lingered. Parents exchanged quiet words with their children, using the moment as an opportunity to teach kindness and respect. Dog owners patted their own companions with newfound appreciation. It wasn't just the bikers who had been humbled, it was everyone in one way or another. Terence could feel the energy in the park shift as he and King moved toward the exit. He didn't need to see the people to know they were watching, reflecting, perhaps even reevaluating their own actions and assumptions. King walked steadily beside him, his posture proud but calm, as if he too understood the significance of what had just unfolded. At the edge of the park, a woman approached hesitantly, carrying a toddler on her hip. She looked at Terence with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly, "for standing up to them, for showing all of us what strength looks like." Terence smiled, his expression warm but humble. "It wasn't just me," he replied, resting a hand on King's head. "It's easy to stand tall when you've got someone like him by your side." The woman nodded, glancing at King. "He's incredible. You're both incredible." Terence chuckled lightly. "He's just doing what he's trained to do. But if today taught me anything, it's that we all have a role to play. Standing up for what's right isn't just about moments like this, it's about the small choices we make every day." The woman smiled, adjusting her hold on her toddler. "Well, you've definitely inspired me, and I think you've inspired a lot of people here today." As the woman walked away, Terence took a moment to pause, letting the warmth of the sun soak into his skin. He reached down to scratch behind King's ears, his voice soft but full of gratitude. "Good boy, King, you did good today." King leaned into the touch, his tail wagging slightly. A rare show of relaxation after such an intense encounter together. They resumed their walk, leaving the park behind, but carrying with them the quiet victory of a lesson. Well taught, the world is full of moments where we're called to choose between doing what's easy and doing what's right. It doesn't take grand gestures to make a difference. Sometimes it's as simple as treating others, human or animal, with the respect they deserve. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's remind each other that strength isn't about intimidation or force. It's about kindness, courage, and standing up for what's right. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that inspire and uplift. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.